Hello and welcome to your next National 4 and 5 Computing Science lesson. Last lesson, we looked at the input process output model, the print function to output data, and using variables as storage locations for values. If you need to review any of these concepts, please pause the video now and go watch lesson 2 to refresh. Today we're going to look at data types in computer programming. We will be successful if by the end of this lesson you can describe the 4 types of variables you'll use in National 4-5 programming and implement them in our programming language Python. Remember to please complete all your task sheets on Google Classroom and turn them in, and hand in any programming assignments on Replit. We have 4 types of variables that we'll use at National 4-5 level. A data type of a variable describes the kind of data that's being held and what sort of functions and operations we can perform on them. The first of which we've already encountered is a string variable. A string variable holds any combination of printable characters such as letters, numbers and symbols, or alphanumeric characters. It's important to note that the data in a string variable must be stored inside speech marks, marking the beginning and end of the string. In our example, we've given the string variable the meaningful identifier pupil name and assigned the value Anakin Skywalker. The next data type is integer. An integer stores a whole number, that is a number without any decimal point. Unlike strings, we can do mathematical operations on integers. In our example, we've given the integer variable the meaningful identifier pupil age and assigned the value of 13. Notice how we don't use speech marks for the value 13. The next data type is another type of number called a real number. A real number stores a number with a decimal point. Like integers, we can perform mathematical operations on real numbers. In our example, we've given the real number variable the meaningful identifier attendance percent and assigned the value 98.2. Again, we do not put this value inside speech marks. Finally, our last data type is Boolean. A Boolean value can be one of 2 values, either true or false. Like strings, we can't do any maths on Booleans. In our example, we've given our Boolean the meaningful identifier absent today, that is, whether or not a pupil is absent from school, and assigned the value true without speech marks. Now it's over to you for a task. You'll find task 1.4 in Google Classroom. This task is all about which data type to use for a given piece of data. For some of them, you'll also have to come up with a meaningful identifier. That is a variable name which describes contents of the variable. For each piece of data, I've given you a context to help you make sense of it. Pause this video now and resume once you've handed in the worksheet on Google Classroom. When we are writing our programs, we should declare all the variables we're going to use right at the start of our code and assign them initial values. This keeps your code tidy and prevents errors further along the line with variable names and scope. In the following code examples, there won't be any output. We're not printing anything to the console. We've already been using string variables, but without using the string function. To create a string variable in Python, we should use the str function. In the example below, we've created a variable with the identifier pupil name and assigned its value to Anakin Skywalker using the str function. Note that the string must be contained within speech marks. To create an integer, we use the int function. Notice in the example below, we do not wrap the value inside speech marks like a string. In the example below, we've created an integer variable with the identifier pupil age and the value 15 using the int function. To create a real number, we use the float function. This is short for floating point number, which is another name for a number with a decimal point. In an exam theory question, we should talk about real numbers, but in coding examples, it's fine to use the term float. In the example below, we created a real number with the identifier pupil name and the value of 15.5. If we were to create a real number using the float function, but pass the function an integer value like 15, the variable would be stored as 15.0. To create a Boolean variable, we'll use the bool function. This function accepts two values, true with a capital T or false with a capital F. If you use speech marks with these values, they will not work, and if you do not capitalize them properly, they will not work. In the example below, we've created a Boolean variable with the identifier pupil attendance and assigned the value to true. Now it's over to you for a coding task. On your Replit assignments, you will see an assignment called Task 1.5 Python Data Types. Create a suitable variable under each comment. Pause this video and resume when you have handed in the assignment on Replit. This week we've looked at different data types and why we need to use them in computer programming. We have looked at the 4 different types of data and their purposes. We have also looked at the different functions we use to declare our data at the beginning of our computer programs in Python. Next week, we'll look at operations on strings and number variables. See you next week.